Hello, everybody. We're going to get started with our webinar here. I just wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. Will be available for watching later on our website later this week. If you have questions, please make sure to ask in the chat or to ask a question to a panelist directly. We want to make sure that everybody has the time to ask their questions of our panelists today. And with that, we'll turn it over to Darby Garcia.
Hi, welcome to our January webinar. This has been a great year for webinars, even though we miss each other in person. So I'd like to take a second real quick to talk about our March and April webinars, so nobody make sure to miss those. The March one's amazing. It's workplace resiliency, calming in critical moments. So that one's going to be super cool on March 17th, so save your calendars. March 21st will be about inhabited vehicles, nomadic lifestyle, people living in their cars. That one also is going to be a good one. We're working on May's date. We've got a couple of hot topics, so stay tuned for those, but make sure to join us for the March and the April ones. Then February 25th, what day is that? Thursday this week, we have our super fun Mardi Gras and Swift to Sweethearts competition social hour. There are some fun prizes for best Mardi Gras themed outfit. Probably that one could be a little scary, but it could be a whole dang lot of fun. There's a boa. There's this little fun thing that, I don't know, I've worn all the stuff off playing with it. Valentine's Day pickup lines. Hopefully everybody ate their baby cake. I didn't hear if anyone got a baby. The cake was fabulous. Then we've got Sweethearts Challenge. There's, oh, it's disappeared. Never mind. Here we go. Never mind. It's not going to work. Make a card. Valentine's Day card with pickup lines. Cheesiest pickup line, most artistic, most creative, and best parking related pun. So it'll be a fun time. Now on to our webinar. This is Pandemic Recovery Planning. It's a follow-up to webinar we had in July. If any of you remember the webinar our panelists were speaking about in July, their thought process was very different from where we are today. So it'll be a great follow-up. We have got our panelists, Mr. Donovan Durband with City of Tucson, Brandy Stanley with City of Las Vegas, Jim Sayre with University of Arizona is unable to make it today, and Andy Cushman from LAS. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Vidor, who is the moderator of our session.
Thanks, Darby. Appreciate that. So last night I watched our webinar with this panel that was from July 8th of last summer, and the discussion was really good. It's worth going back and watching it again. One of the things I want to talk about today with the group is some of the speculation and some of the thoughts and forward thinking that each of you shared in July last year. So we're 8 months since then, things have changed. I finally got a haircut, so that's good. But we'll talk about that. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to address some audience questions as well. So at any time, please in the chat, ask your questions and we'll get those over to our panelists. But I wanted to start with Brandy. Brandy is a past president with the organization and currently serves on the board. She is an amazing asset to the organization and is responsible for all the fun and too much fun that you have at the conference every year. Brandy, you've talked in the past with this organization about TNC management and curbside planning and staging areas. You talked about that in July. You talked about that in 2019 at the conference. Where is that gone and how is that going?
Well, it's great to talk about. In terms of actually going, not not so much. We launched an off-street TNC staging zone where we identified a couple of our parking garages that were right downtown, but were unused at night. We developed a partnership with Uber where they would advertise to their drivers that the drivers could come and park for free instead of drive around on the streets and clog up all the intersection and the traffic. So we launched it on March 17th of 2020. We ran it for 2 days and then promptly shut it down because everything shut down for COVID. So that's been great. It's a great publicity story, but we haven't actually seen if it works. So we're going to try to do that as soon as the demand picks back up. Uber is still interested in doing it, so we'll see what it looks like. Again, we're in the let's talk about it stage. We're not in the let's see how it worked. We also have been working with Cox Communications on a automated solution for managing a curb for passenger pickup and drop off with taxis and TNCs. And that too was about ready to go right when COVID hit. And then all of a sudden there weren't any taxis or TNCs to manage. So again, great to talk about, but so far we haven't actually seen it in action. It's actually installed on our street. It looks great, but we don't know if it's going to work. So we have to wait until we emerge a little bit more from some of this pandemic issue. I don't know. I'm trying to find words that aren't curse words, but basically we have to emerge a little bit more before we can actually see if all that works. So still talking about it, haven't actually done it.
What do you think that time frame might look like? I mean, when does the city of Las Vegas start to allow events and activities? When does sporting events open back up? Has the governor provided any thoughts on what that time horizon looks like?
Unfortunately, not really. So we went from 25% indoor capacity to a whopping 35% indoor capacity 2 days ago, with plans, I think, in the next 60 days to go to 50%. But there has been no mention of reopening sports venues or starting to book events and all of that, because there really hasn't been any guidance. Nobody really knows at what point the vaccine is going to be available to the general public, which in my opinion is sort of going to be the catalyst for lifting restrictions and returning back to normal life, but we don't know when that's going to be. So hopefully soon, but we don't have a date.
Well, there's no lack of planning, at least in the TNC realm over the last few years. We're excited to watch it unfold when it actually comes to fruition. Andy, in July, you talked about, and Stephanie Barnes with your company talked about, repurposing of staff and being nimble and flexible and working with your customers to do more than just park their cars as a valet service at a hospital, or to manage the garage. What's transpired since July that you've been doing with your staff, and how are they doing, personally, having to adapt to being very flexible for something they certainly didn't sign up to do in most cases?
Yeah, it's definitely been a little bit of a roller coaster, I think, for a lot of us out there, but we definitely have some staff that are more willing to adapt and expand their roles as we need them to. It's definitely not for everyone, and some people are more cautious than others, and rightly so. So it's just lots about the communication, working with our team, our HR department, to figure out which of the employees are looking for that additional work and able to help us out, and then finding the spots for them. So I think a lot of what we've been, evolving in, and I think what's going to stay a focus is just in the healthcare, industry. It's not just with the COVID vaccination and testing that we're doing now, but I think it's just company-wide, definitely seeing a little bit of a push on that side of the business, and getting more and more involved in healthcare, and just finding ways that we can support that side of the business. It's a part of the business I've been involved in for a little while now, so I'm happy for it. I'm been involved in it for a while, and I like working in that segment, so that's been a great part of all this, and just getting more and more involved in that. But a lot of it is, technology has just allowed us to keep in touch more also with our team members from coast to coast. Meetings like Zoom and, Teams and regular recorded, live meetings, the entertainment value and the production quality have definitely gotten better from our team. And some of it is even just frontline employees, now there's more options for them to get on a biweekly update call from the company. So they're just able to be more, involved and up to date on everything that we're doing from coast to coast, not just in the region that I'm overseeing. So that's been a huge part. I think that's going to continue. I definitely hope so. And then for just all the different teams from business development to the different, silos, just being able to stay in touch and more in tune with what we're doing in all the different regions that we have, through the virtual meetings, seeing people face to face that sometimes we didn't see, but, once a year, in person. Now we've been able to see them and get to know them a little bit better through the course of all this. But, that's some things that I think will continue to happen even as we come out of all this, is just staying more in touch throughout the company.
It's interesting you make that comment about being in touch more often with people that you might not have seen, in person as often. In July, Jim Sayre with the University of Arizona was talking about how beneficial that's been, and one of those unintended consequences of all of this as a positive thing. I, see the connection that we have as this organization being similar, right? We might see each other once a year or twice a year, and now we have the opportunity to see each other, proverbially speaking, twice a month at our webinars and our social events. So in a lot of ways, I think that that's been a really positive outcome of that. And I hope it continues. I mean, I love seeing everybody in a 2x2 inch tile. I'd love to see you in person and can't wait till we can do that. But I think it's interesting to hear that, it's not just one person's perspective of this, and that Laz as an organization and you, Andy, have, shown that it's been done and been successful. Also, I should mention for those on the call, Andy Cushman is our current treasurer. So he manages all of our finances and is on the board of directors for his renewal term this year. So thanks, Andy, for all of the continued hard work that you put into this organization. Donovan, let's switch to you and talk about, how your staff are doing and stay kind of in that same tenor. Again, in July, you talked about, some staff changes that you made. How are they doing now?
Well, going back to July, we had just, that we were about 4 months into the pandemic at that point. And, when it all started, we quickly, realized our revenue was going to drop dramatically and that we needed to keep our expenses down as much as possible. We didn't have that many tools to hold all of our expenses down, as we have fixed debt service costs we have to pay, and we don't necessarily have flexibility about staffing, as far as we don't have the flexibility within the city to just say furlough our staff or to do layoffs. But we did deploy most of our enforcement agents who, we continue to do enforcement all throughout, although we didn't enforce meters. We did other types of enforcement, but with the excess enforcement agents, we redeployed them to do security at our garages and lots to save money on our contracted people. But by the time, we got to the midsummer, I think we were starting to realize the pandemic wasn't really ending anytime soon. And the economic impacts were really not going to end anytime soon. And we had just started our new fiscal year on July 1st, and we had to revise our revenue forecasts and really kind of say, like, what can we cut? Because we're going to burn through our cash reserves this next year. We burned through about a third of our cash reserves just in the last 4 months of fiscal 20 because of the dramatic drop in revenue. So we knew we couldn't really continue to bleed cash like that and have that kind of depletion. So shortly after that webinar, we ended up having a meeting with our director of our transportation and mobility department, who we answer to. And we decided that we needed to redeploy as many of our staff as we could to other divisions within our transportation and mobility department. So we, as of August 3, we lost to our division, to Park Tucson, we lost temporarily, but now we're still in the temporary mode now. We lost 7 of our operations people, our enforcement agents, and we lost 3 of our office staff, which is more than half of our staff. So, and it was about the same time we were cleared to resume meter enforcement by late summer. So it was really a challenge, because we had three enforcement agents to do all the enforcement, which includes citywide. We get calls all around the city for parking enforcement. We had to have those guys doing, meter collections, meter repair, meter installs, dealing with the takeout parking signage and all that kind of stuff. Roving security, as we were also cutting way back at our contracted security. So we had, everybody had to suddenly take on more responsibilities. Our on-street and enforcement manager had to go back to doing enforcement, and also he's doing meter collections. Our off-street facilities manager, he's doing roving security, in addition to, managing the maintenance of the structures and so forth, and the systems. And then my finance manager works now 1 day a week at one of our garages at the security booth, helping customers. So he's sitting there with his laptop every Tuesday. In fact, our commission met yesterday, and he was on the call doing our financial report from January, and everybody could see that he was sitting there at the booth while he was doing that. And then our account clerk, who also does our bookkeeping, he spends the other 4 days a week at that garage at the booth, because we no longer have the contracted security person there to do the customer service. So everybody's had to pitch in and do something different. And I'm really proud of everybody. It's been very stressful for everybody. It's been frustrating. We'd like to get more people back, but our revenue is just not really picked up substantially since last summer. And so we just kind of have to make do with what we have. And I look at that as, it's really an accomplishment, that we're able to survive this time, protecting our cash reserve, but also continuing to provide service to our customers, keeping the lights on, as it were, keeping the garages safe and clean and functional and everything. And we're still doing enforcement and all that. And then another positive side of this is that we redeployed people to do some other jobs within the transportation department that needed to be done, that they needed extra staffing to do street maintenance and landscape maintenance around the city. So we don't have to pay for them while they're not with us doing the parking business, but they didn't lose their jobs. They're still working, and they're still contributing to something that our city needed done. And then a couple of them are actually have been volunteering with our City of Tucson mass vaccination site at our convention center downtown, which just opened up a few weeks ago. So a couple of those guys that we had to redeploy are now assisting with the operations of that. So, we're proud that we managed to keep everybody with a job, doing necessary stuff. And meanwhile, we're just trying to, we're keeping everything going and doing our business and paying our bills. So, it's been tough on everybody, but I think everybody has sort of pulled together and feels proud of what we've been able to do with the skeleton crew.
You talk about, people being flexible. That definitely is a case where people have been really flexible in their jobs. I just put a poll question up to see how many people have worked frontline parking in their career. Something that resonated with me, Donovan, is that people that used to work frontline have moved out of the front line and into different positions within Park Tucson and have, right, wrong, or indifferent, had to move back kind of into frontline operations. If there's one thing that, we know about this business, is parking is a people business, and it takes a lot of work, and it's a hard job. You definitely deal with a lot of flack from people, and it's not fun. And one of the things that we here at the Southwest Parking and Transportation Association do is provide frontline training resources. That's traditionally done at our conference. We're probably going to need to bring that back virtually. But it's great to hear kind of the nimbleness of the folks on your team that have had to move back around. Of the 25 attendees that are on our webinar from, it looks like, across the country today, about 63% of us have worked a frontline job at some point in our career in parking. So I think it goes to show that, most all of us would, put back on the paint spock, so to speak, right? And collect the revenue if need be. And, that resiliency in our industry definitely shows. So thanks for sharing those results with us. If we have an opportunity to ask another poll question that's tied into today's conversation, we'll ask that as well. And by the way, for those that don't know Donovan is on the board of the association and recently joined the executive committee and is in his official duties the secretary. So he keeps everybody straight and records the history of what we do here at the organization. So thanks for your continued efforts with the organization as well, Donovan. Brandy, in the same tenor of staffing, you've clearly had to make some adjustments. How are your staff doing? Emotionally, do they have major burnout like everyone else? And how have their interactions with kind of the frontline customer been?
So it's been pretty tough. We sort of never stopped working. We ceased in, meter enforcement and switched, like Donovan's staff, we switched our efforts out towards the neighborhoods because we started getting a lot of calls. But we were considered, our mayor wanted everybody working and considered everyone frontline staff. So we have been in the trenches, most of us in the office since the beginning. And we've had a lot of staff catch the virus. For a while in January, we were averaging 1 to 2 people a week that were coming back and testing positive. So it's been a toll. And then obviously we have remote school. So we have, our folks that are, parents, single parents, that kind of stuff have had to manage remote school along with work and all of that. So it's been pretty rough. And it's taken a toll, which is why it's so nice that there's an end at the end of there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Sorry. So I think our morale is actually starting to pick back up, even though things are still a little bit tough. At least we know that it's going to get better. So that's been really helpful recently. But like Donovan, and Andy, we've sort of made use of our staff in other ways. Most of them are back into our department, but we repurpose staff to manage an outdoor dining facility. We have had people volunteering to do compliance with the businesses on their head count in the business and wearing masks and all of that stuff. So we sort of have done a lot of repurposing. We haven't laid anyone off, mostly because the city has not had any appetite to do so. So they have figured out a way to make everyone's payroll, even though, at least for a while, our enterprise fund was not able to sustain it. So we burned through, unlike Donovan, we burned through all of our cash. We basically don't have any cash left. Fortunately, our revenues have picked up to the point where we can just barely break even. So we're pretty safe now in terms of all the staff. We have some natural attrition and we have some vacancies and all of that stuff, which we're keeping open until we can afford to hire people back. But we're in decent shape and things are not as uncertain as they have been. So things are kind of looking up. So we're pretty happy about that. It's still, like I said, still tough, but it's not going to be forever. For a while there, I felt like it was.
Well, some days go faster than others, and some days drag on for what seems like months sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question here from one of the attendees, from Maria Tomeo Soto, who is our current vice president. Maria is with the Las Vegas Convention Center, and Maria handles all of the social media postings for the organization and works with the Las Vegas Convention Center. Her question, Brandy, is about paid parking in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
It's no surprise that paid parking at resorts and casinos kind of came into light and has, quickly stopped on a temporary basis and in some changes, sometimes permanently. What do you speculate and what are you seeing and hearing to that degree in the future? Do you think it'll come back over time, or do you think, paid parking and some of those models you're dead?
Paid parking in Las Vegas is not dead, actually. I think that what ultimately happens is you may see some free parking at some of the one-off casinos, but without announcing it, Caesars, their portfolio actually started charging again. I don't know when they did it because they never made an announcement. They kind of took a page out of our playbook. We make changes without making an announcement because most people don't. It doesn't really matter, but people like to get emotional about parking. MGM, again, this is just speculation. I don't have any idea, but the revenue stream that they saw from parking was probably too high for them to consider abandoning it permanently. Some of the hotels that maybe didn't start charging for parking may not, and it may be a while before they do. But casinos typically don't tip their hand, so anything that I'm saying is pretty much speculation. No rumors, no nothing like that. Just silence. It's just, like I said, the MGM made an awful lot of money on parking, and I think it's going to be tough for them to justify permanently giving up that revenue stream, especially when Caesars has started to charge again.
Well, there's no doubt that parking is a $100 billion industry, so making those revenue streams go away completely is going to be difficult for the people that are counting the money at the end of the day. Thanks for the question, Maria. That's a good one. And if you have questions, please ask them in the chat or send a panelist a question. Andy, I want to come back to you. One of the things that you talked about with your staff and repurposing your staff is a result of change. And some of it's been forced changed. And I think there's been a lot of good changes that have come out of this. And making the right decision because frankly, the decision needed to be made for, a company or people. What have your customers done that you think will stick around? And it's been as a result of the pandemic, but the changes will be good changes. And I guess that question is for, Laz, if you care to share as a company or, your customers.
Yeah, I'll kind of speak more for just the locations that I have involvement in and can speak a little bit more on, but I think just some of the technology, it wasn't all new technology for some of the touchless options for the parking, equipment or the, pay by text, pay through the app, QR codes. A lot of that wasn't necessarily new, but it was kind of pushed into the forefront and it was adopted much quicker than I think it would have been otherwise. I have one particular small garage that, was still taking cash. They're still taking cash, but now the pay by text, payments are starting to outpace the cash payments. And already we were seeing the push going away from cash to credit card, and that's continued. But, now we're seeing, these other options being used, in more frequency than I think they would have been if there hadn't been this kind of push to get it going. You see in a lot of restaurants now and other, industries. So it's just becoming more commonplace for, I think, people to use those different technologies, and they're actually looking for it. It's just less touch points. Some, restaurants that might not have wanted to go more of an automated valet type system are definitely, it's more intriguing to them now to do that. And so I think just the technology kind of push has definitely been sped along.
Yeah, I think I've heard, across the industry that technology changes that were there and available are moving a lot quicker. Donovan, you in July last summer speculated that you would see an increase in mobile payments in Tucson. Has that come to fruition?
Yes, it has. So we've had mobile pay for meters since January of 2015, but we really didn't have a very high adoption rate. We were just plugging along at like 5% use for several years. And as of January of 2020, so the beginning of last calendar year, 2 months before the pandemic really hit, we were at 8%. And then when the pandemic hit and we were the main focus then, I think, was on touching and washing your hands and sanitizing surfaces more so than the airborne, factors with the masks and so forth. But we stopped enforcing the meters, and we knew that we would really want to encourage people. I mean, we wanted to encourage people to still pay the meters because we had not gotten orders from on high to stop charging, but we wanted to give people an option or make them aware of the existing option to have a touchless payment. So we canceled, or we suspended the convenience fee on our app, which was 25 cents. And then we also put messaging on our little LED display on the meters, which suggested, and we said, we're sanitizing the meters every day, but for a touch-free option, download the Go Tucson Parking app and pay that way. So we immediately started seeing an uptick, albeit on very low volume overall. But we've kept the convenience fee suspended all this time, and we've seen a steady increase all throughout 2020. And now we're over 16%. So it's still, it's still not that high, but it's literally doubled in this last year. So that's been a positive. And we're gonna, we pretty much had to suspend marketing efforts for financial reasons. We would usually promote events and festivals in the downtown area as a way to kind of promote our parking, promoting the events and then saying, here's where you park to go to this festival or that event. So we had, no events, no marketing basically in that regard, and with social media. But we're starting to do more. Promotion of the app as an option. And so I mentioned we're at about 16%, but we're at about 40% or so is with coin in the meters, and about 40% or so is through credit and debit cards inserted into the meter. And now we're working on a mobile pay option for our transient garage visits as well. So that's something we're trying to get done this year. I was hoping to get it done already, and we could have a big win during the pandemic, but it's still in process. But that's, just like everybody else, I think we're headed towards as much cashless, touchless, contact-free payment as possible.
Well, there's this old saying, it's all about the Benjamins, right? And I just launched a poll question to see if people think that cash is still king, or if that's, completely gone away. And I think that question has to do with parking and how parking is paid for. But, our daily lives have changed in the way that you pay for things. It's too easy to Venmo somebody $4 and move that money back and forth to people than pulling out your wallet and having a $5 bill and hoping that they have $1 in change. The results are interesting, though. There's still 30% of people that are on the call that believe cash is king. So you're probably going to want to check under their mattresses because it's probably stuffed full of Benjamins. But the result is, at least from this group, there's 20 people here on the call at this point, and almost all of them say, that we're done with cash as a society. So thanks for answering those questions, audience. Brandy, from a technology perspective, what are you doing differently in the city from cash collection, and how has that changed in the last 12 months? And what's the future of that in Las Vegas in terms of new technologies that you're looking to adapt to?
Well, cash is definitely more royalty here in Las Vegas than pretty much anywhere else I've been recently. You get ATMs that dispense $50 and $100 bills. So there's people use cash more here than they do in most places. And, one of the things we've tried to do is to introduce more cashless payment options. And people typically don't pay in cash at our parking meters, mostly because we don't take bills. So they will use credit cards, and our rates are high enough that it's really inconvenient to find enough quarters to pay, $3 for an hour of parking. So that further reduces the amount of cash that we take. But in July, we did actually launch a new mobile payment app, and we also added on the idea of being able to pay by scanning a QR code or tap an NFC tag without downloading an app. And what we found was that 75% of the transactions using a mobile method were using the QR code. And so we like that because people obviously are telling us that they don't want to download an app, and having an appless solution has been of benefit. However, we have never, ever been able to move the needle on significant adoption of mobile payments. So we've never broken even 5%, and we're still not at 5%. We eat the fee. We don't charge a convenience fee back to the customer. So honestly, I don't know what the future of mobile payments are in Las Vegas. We just have not gotten the adoption that we'd like to get. In terms of other technology, obviously we're doing cleaning. We had so many people test positive that we went ahead and bought the hospital grade disinfectant and the atomizers. So we fog our offices every morning. And we are just getting ready to go live on a license plate on changing from pay by space to pay by plate. And those things have sort of taken over. And they were all things that we sort of started before COVID, but we got a little bit more time, and we've been able to spend the time and resources to really flesh out the systems and get them right.
It's interesting that the city ended up having to buy a fogger. I think that goes to show that there's new technology out there that's not parking technology, that's there to keep your staff safe. So that's cool to hear. I wonder how much of that subscribership to mobile apps and payment using a mobile app that you have to download has to do with the user base in Las Vegas, and that a lot of your customer base is probably not from Las Vegas, right? They're coming from different parts of the country, so they might not have that app in their town. They haven't heard of that. Do you see that as a challenge for that customer base? And then do you have any sense of what that subscribership is for, maybe residents, and does that vary?
So because we're downtown and not on the strip, we actually have, I would say that probably 80% of our parking customers are locals. The casino corridor really doesn't have very much on-street parking. Most of it is off-street. So the on-street and parking lots that we have predominantly serve locals. You know what? Honestly, I really can't figure it out, which drives me crazy because I like to figure stuff out. And I have no idea why we're not able to get a higher subscription rate. We're doing everything the way we should, at least as far as I know. City of Miami has a huge adoption rate, and we basically mirrored our program off of theirs. and we still didn't even get 5%. So I don't know. If anybody has ideas, let me know.
Well, I think I saw somewhere in the last day or so that there is a technology company that doesn't require app use anymore as a new kind of technology. So we'll see where that goes. It's interesting to hear the difference, between what happens in downtown and what happens on the Strip. If you've ever been to Las Vegas for our convention, you know that we are not on the Strip and that we are in, downtown. And it's a very different, feel to what Las Vegas is. But speaking of that, and coming to Las Vegas, we're excited to see you later this fall in October at our conference. So, fingers crossed, vaccine dosages and arms continuing to skyrocket. We can put together a great, show in person. We realize that there's going to be some people that aren't going to be able to attend the show, and we are going to work hard to make sure that we can still engage with you. We've been able to engage with our members really well in 2020. And yesterday, the Parking Podcast dropped an episode. The cool kids say the word dropped, I'm told. My son tells me that I was dropped on a podcast. So in all seriousness, the association was featured on Isaiah Meow's podcast yesterday. Go to our LinkedIn page and check out the link for that. Give it a listen. It talks about, the resiliency that our organization has had, the times that we flipped and flopped more than we can count, and the genesis behind how we got to where we're at today and how the swag box came to be and the idea of cooking with Carmen. And we're going to use that leverage. We're going to use that momentum. We're going to keep it moving here in 2021. It's worth a listen when you're sitting at your house, when you're driving in circles around the block because you need to get out of your house. So give that a listen. I wanted to talk about a couple more things before we close. Donovan, this last summer, the city of Tucson implemented some changes with the way that they managed the curb. And you talked about, you blocked off spaces and created them as to, carry out food pickup and, stop charging in some of those spaces. What do you think that looks like, this summer? How did the downtown merchants and business owners react to that? Are you bringing that back in, 2021? And how does that look, post-pandemic?
Yeah, so our mayor declared, the sort of the lockdown on indoor dining on March 16 of last year, effective the next day on St. Patrick's Day. And on March 18, we started putting out temporary signs in front of restaurants, designating them as free takeout parking zones, 15 minutes of free parking. And then over the next couple of days, we designed and got some more permanent signs made and basically established about 90 different miniature, actually there's about 90 to 100 spaces. Most of them are 2-space segments. So probably there's about 40 or 50 zones that are adjacent to restaurants. Not just in downtown, we actually have 3 separate or distinct business districts in our downtown area that are all connected by our streetcar system. So we have the downtown core, we have 4th Avenue, and then we have the main gate area next to the University of Arizona. And so we did that program for the free takeout parking in all 3 of those zones, plus the Mercado on the west side, which is already free parking. But so we did that, and obviously that was very, very well received, and people appreciated that we responded really quickly with that. And I mentioned some of the marketing we used to do of events. We switched immediately over from that in terms of our social media and emails and so forth, that we promoted the takeout parking and all the restaurants that were still open. So we sent out a weekly email for several months and then posted it on social media that had maps of all of our free parking areas and listed all the restaurants that were open and available to use those. So we have not stopped that. We've made some adjustments here and there. Some other areas came on that were, restaurants closed and then reopened at some point and wanted to be a part of that. So we set up some new takeout areas, and we've made some adjustments, but it's been continuous and we're still doing that. And frankly, I don't see that we would be stopping that anytime soon. I would imagine we'll be doing that at least through the summer, if not all of 2021. And then I guess we'll just have to see. We may, when it's all over, we may end up, and those are all metered spaces. So, so basically we bag the meter and then put these signs up over them. And so when things kind of get back to normal, what may happen is that those spaces, the meters get unhooded and get turned back on again, but we'll keep them as like a very short term, short time limit, but maybe or maybe not still paid. Some of them may just become 15-minute paid parking in front of the restaurants, and that would become the permanent arrangement. And then I think I mentioned last summer, we were also looking at, I know every city's been doing this, has been making accommodations for outdoor dining. We have the limited indoor seating capacity. So we as a city have offered kind of a 2-track process for approvals of outdoor dining that uses either the sidewalk or the parking spaces or both. And so for temporary setups, we're actually letting people use the sidewalk for their dining area, and then we're putting out temporary pedestrian ramps on the street in the parking spaces so people can walk around the temporary dining areas and continue on as pedestrians. And so we're offering all those all that infrastructure as a free service to get the businesses through, to get the restaurants, let them stay open and have extended capacity. And then we're also revising our program for more permanent use of those spaces. If they're interested in, investing in more permanent infrastructure, we have a process for allowing them to do that and to take on-street spaces for the dining, provided that they're obviously have a lot of, criteria as far as the safety and sanitation and security of it. So we didn't charge anything for the restaurants to do the temporary dining on the street in the parking spaces, but we'll probably be charging a fee as part of like their permanent licensing fee for the more permanent setups of restaurants in the street.
Interesting. I've heard a lot of success stories with some of these parklets that have come up and how successful they've been. And I think that the pandemic has gotten some cities and towns and municipalities off center in that regard. We've talked about it for a long time as an industry and show the benefits to being able to do that. And there's so many communities across the country, but a lot that I've seen here in Colorado this summer that I see that stuff sticking around for those very reasons that you mentioned. I put up a poll here about the conference and being able to attend in person. There's a few people that haven't voted. If you haven't voted, we'd like to get your thoughts on that. So please share with us your interest in attending in person or virtual only, or for whatever reason you're not able to attend. We want to take that back to our board and conference planning committee to make sure that we're providing the best value and experience for you. I wanted to close on high notes. I think that the pandemic has, created a lot of anxiety, but I think that the pandemic has created a lot of positive things that have happened, in our communities and in our personal lives and in our organizations. Andy, do you want to share, kind of what a small win has been for you recently on a personal, professional, Laz, win from your customers, so we can close on high watermark?
Yeah, I think one of the big wins is that, construction didn't stop through all this. There's still been new builds going out there. Still RFPs coming out for new business. So the new business hasn't stopped. You know, there's definitely some things to work around and it's changed maybe a little bit, but you know, there's still stuff coming. We have a new hotel that we're going to be opening up next month. It obviously probably won't open as busy as it would have under normal circumstances, but the fact that it's opening and still going on as scheduled has been great. So throughout all this, we've still had some new business wins. So that's always helpful to keep the morale up and keep everyone moving forward. And just definitely a win that we're starting to bring more and more people back to work. So that's been great.
Thanks for sharing that, Andy. Donovan, how about you? What's a small recent win for you or your organization?
Well, I'm going to talk about something that's probably a little bit off what we're normally talking about with parking operations. And that is we've had a really nice improvement in terms of our public engagement in the last several months. We've, as a city entity, we have, have to have good relationships with our stakeholders, whether it's the businesses and the business district associations or the neighborhoods. We have 14 neighborhoods in our residential parking program. And I mentioned we have 3 or 4 business districts in our primary service area. And we have a mayor and council established stakeholder commission that is a way for them all to be represented and to give us advisory input on policies and sort of things that we do. It's a 15-member group, and so all those associations are represented. Mayor and council get to appoint people from the neighborhoods. And when the pandemic hit, all of the public bodies, the citizen advisory groups with the city of Tucson basically shut down because in-person meetings, we couldn't have in-person meetings. But by the end of the summer, they developed a protocol and allowed us to start having Zoom type meetings. We work with Microsoft Teams with the city, so we had to get everybody sort of used to other platforms. But so we were able to start meeting again, and that was really it was really interesting because everybody's working from home. So our attendance has been like almost 100%. We meet every month, and we were also able to reestablish 3 or 4 standing committees that had kind of languished. And all the time before the pandemic, we'd have these little ad hoc committees that would come up and, somebody's upset about something. So we'd say, okay, let's get a little working group and a committee, and then you can meet for a few months and we can come up with something, and then the commission can approve it and so forth. But all of our standing efforts kind of fell apart, but we reestablished those when we went away. And when we came back, now we're having monthly meetings of all those committees as well as the commission. Keeps me busy because I sort of have to be the secretary of those as well. But before we'd have the commission would meet at our conference room at our office early in the morning, and we'd serve them coffee and pastries and fruit and everything, and people liked it and they would come. But sometimes people are busy and they just can't make it. But because of the way we're operating now with this, like I said, we haven't had to cancel any meetings for lack of participation. We've had literally 100% attendance at every meeting we've had since August with all the subcommittees. And it's enabled us to really, I think, reconnect with what's going on with people who feel a little bit isolated with things that are happening. It's also let us focus again on some policy issues that we'd sort of kicked to the curb for lack of really interest in moving them along. So the fact that everybody's able to meet and we're able to actually engage with our stakeholders again, we're able to work through some policy challenges that relate to like our neighborhood program that we had not really been able to address before. And so it's nice to see that that's been sort of an unforeseen positive consequence of all this, is that the Zoom environment has helped us to actually have a much more robust way to work with them and to actually kind of get things done that we hadn't been.
Thanks, Donovan. It's a good win. There's a lot of them in there, actually, I think. So appreciate the positivity. Brandy, how about you?
Well, to be honest, the biggest win recently that I'm sort of proud of is that we were able to balance the budget for the next fiscal year. I lost a lot of sleep over that over the last 6 months, and it looks like we're going to make it. So that's a huge win for us. For the city, I'll go back to what Andy said. And, the city in the Las Vegas Valley has not even missed a beat when it comes to expansion, to new construction. We opened up a new casino downtown. I looked at that for having our SWAPTA gathering, and they wanted $25,000 for 100 people. So they're commanding prices that are, similar to the Wynn and Encore. So that's a brand new casino that just opened downtown. There's another huge $4.3 billion casino that's going to open in a few months. 600 residential units are underway. I mean, we have not even missed a beat on the new development. So it's a really, really bright future. And it could have been so much worse. Like all those things could have just come to a screeching halt, and they didn't. So we're pretty happy about that.
I want to just chime in too and say it's the same here in Tucson. It's very positive. The construction, the new development has not missed a beat. We've got apartment buildings under construction in downtown. We've got, I think, 4 hotels that are under construction. We, the city, are working on rebuilding 2 major roadways next to the downtown, and it's just lots of things are happening. That there's a new 20-story mixed-use tower that's going in to replace a vacant parking lot right in the heart of downtown that we never thought would get approved, and has been financed on spec, and that's going to start under construction in a few months. So, well, definitely a bright future if we can make it through the short-term challenges.
Yeah, it's amazing how construction has just continued to plug along. Thinking back to the 2008 recession, and construction just came to a grinding halt. Skyscrapers just floating in the wind everywhere. And that certainly isn't the case now. So I think that'll be good for our economy. It definitely is good for parking, because you need a place to park for all those places that you're building. I'm not good at parking jokes. My parking pun, for next week is that nobody's going to park unless they're necking. So I suspect that you can find a better joke than that, because that was pretty terrible. But in seriousness, I'm excited to continue to hear these updates. I'd like to welcome you all back in July and do another round of this, and just kind of see how things are going. And hopefully Jim Sayre with University of Arizona is able to join us again. Thank you to our panelists today. Thank you to Darby Garcia for helping coordinate the webinar. Donna King with Pasos Robles is working with Darby to take some of the burden off of Darby for doing it for so many years. If you have a webinar topic that you think would be great for the group to hear about, or you would love to talk about, please reach out to Donna King. You can find her email address on the website and get in our queue to talk to our group. I'll close with my small win for the organization. And the small win is a result of a lot of really hard work that our board of directors, which by the way is a volunteer board, our board of directors have real jobs, and believe it or not, the Southwest Parking and Transportation Association isn't what pays the bills for them. And they work tirelessly. So I can't thank that group enough, and our board and our executive leadership team for continuing to make SWAPTA relevant. We've been at this almost a year now, and we continue to have fantastic attendance at our webinars. We continue to have a great time at our social events. The swag boxes have, I think, kept people connected and made this group completely interactive. And I can't wait to see all of you in person and outside of a 2x2 screen. So thanks for joining our webinar. Get on our website, watch our past webinars, get signed up for the social event next week, so we can get bumper to bumper and hear about Mardi Gras traditions. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again to our panelists for joining us in our series on the road to recovery.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
for being with us. Bye-bye. Go Swapto.